Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now I did have another video planned for today, but due to unforeseen circumstances, well, I thought we'd just upgrade my Alienware M11X R2 gaming laptop. Now back in the day this was certainly more capable of running games than it is in 2021, but all we're going to be doing is giving it some more RAM, and we'll also be removing the US keyboard and replacing it with a UK keyboard in order to make it more attractive to potential buyers on eBay UK. Now there are other problems with this laptop, such as the CPU and GPU limitations when it comes to running modern titles, but there really isn't anything that we can do about that. So the process begins by undoing 8 screws on the plastic back of the machine. Now I found that these don't come all the way out, which is good in a way because it means we won't lose them, and once these have been unscrewed, the back should lift up like so. You don't need any special tools to do this. It does come off pretty easily, and once that's done you can see that we have immediate access to the battery, the RAM, as well as the hard drive should we want to upgrade this later on. The first thing we're going to do then is remove the RAM, which is as simple as pushing back a couple of these clips and taking the module out of place. As you can see here, we have a single 2 gig stick of DDR3 or laptop DDR3. We're going to be replacing this a little later on, but first, I keep saying first, but this is about the 5th thing that we've actually done. The battery is going to come out next. This is as simple as removing the power cable for the battery, undoing 2 more non-removable screws, and then lifting the battery out of place and putting it to one side because we'll certainly need this later on. As you can see, it's quite a chunky boy here, which is probably for the best, but even then the battery of this laptop isn't very good, and I don't think it ever really was. Once that's out the way, we've got 4 more screws to take out here. I'm not certain that these screws need to come out, at least not all of them, but from a couple of other tutorials I've seen, this is the case, and we can always put these back later on, so there's no harm in removing these screws. Nothing is going to fall out of place or be damaged in us doing so. Just one more to remove here, and always be sure with all screws to put them in a safe place. So for the next part, we're actually going to flip the laptop back over because we don't need to do anything else here. All we need to really do here is lift and push the screen back as far as it will go to give us access to the bezel around the top of the keyboard. Now we need to remove this plastic part here, as this will give us access to the final 2 screws that we need to remove in order to take this keyboard off of the machine. You can see my bald head in this picture here. So this can be quite awkward to do, but again, you probably don't need any special tools. It should just clip out of place, and doing this will reveal the last 2 screws that need to come out. One of the screws is above the pause key on the keyboard here, and the other is above the F3 key. Be careful not to confuse these screws with the 2 that hold this sort of circuit board thing in place, because you probably don't want to remove that, or you certainly don't need to for what we're doing. Now once these 2 screws have been removed, the keyboard should come off quite easily. It lifts up from the top corners and then slides towards the display, but as you can see, it can be a little tricky and may require a little bit, but not too much force, because we don't want to damage the cables underneath. I'm just going to lift this up from the bottom here and show you. As you can see, we've got a couple of cables here that if you use too much force on with removing the keyboard, you might accidentally break them. Now these cables can be removed by lifting up the black retaining clips, and then this should just come out of place like so. So here is our new keyboard. Now there are actually a few variations with the keys here. It does differ slightly from the US keyboard. I'll grab the old keyboard to show you a couple of the differences. So obviously with the UK keyboard we have the pound sign on the number 3 key. There is also a couple of other differences in where the keys are placed. The shift keys are different sizes, and the enter keys on the right hand side are also different sizes, with it being slightly bigger on the UK keyboard. It's not too much of a serious change, but I find it quite interesting to note that there are actually some differences between UK and US keyboards. I'm surprised that you guys in the US don't have a pound sign on your keyboard, but then again, why would you? Now, in order to install the new keyboard, we need to reattach these awkward cables. I actually didn't film this process because it is very awkward indeed to try and reattach these, but all you do is slide them back into place and push the black retaining clips back down, and after that the keyboard should sit in place by sliding it back towards the mouse pad first and then pushing it down. As you can see here, this is how it will look after reattaching those pesky cables. The keyboard will then slide back towards the mouse pad and it should clip into place nicely. This is actually quite a satisfying noise, so I'll let you listen to it. That's all there really is to it, to be honest. We also have to replace the plastic, I'm not really sure what to call it, the plastic bezel here, but first the screws to the keyboard do need to be returned so that it sits firmly in place. Just like the keyboard, the black plastic bezel will just clip back into place and make a very satisfying noise when doing so. And with that, we can close the lid, flip the laptop back over and replace the RAM as well as the battery before tightening those screws back up. So here we are again underneath the laptop, and let's take care of the RAM. Now, for our replacement, instead of using single channel memory, I have decided to go with two 4GB sticks of laptop RAM, two Samsung sticks that I actually had spare from another machine that unfortunately was no longer working. The graphics card in the other machine had died, so I thought what better way to reuse the RAM than in this thing. It's always a good idea to put the bottom module in first and then the module on the top, otherwise it can be very awkward to access. I'm not even sure if you can do it the other way around, but why would you want to? So next up, we're going to replace those 4 screws that we took out underneath the battery. Again, I hope you've put these somewhere safe, because if not, well, the keyboard might fall off. That won't happen, but yeah, it's best to replace every single screw that you remove from any machine that you're either tinkering about with or upgrading. Once the screws are in place, we can go ahead and drop the battery back into the slot, remembering of course to plug in the power cable, otherwise we won't get any power to the machine. With that done, we can tighten up those 2 non-removable screws once again, and that's pretty much it in terms of upgrading the Alienware machine. All we need to do then is drop the black plastic panel back in place, which can be a little bit awkward because there are clips all around it that have to be slotted in a certain way, otherwise one end of it might be sticking up and you might not be able to screw it in place. Just take your time with it and don't be too rough because you don't want to snap anything. But once that's done, well, the 8 screws can be tightened once again, and after that you should be good to go. We will of course be turning this on afterwards and seeing what differences have been made in performance when it comes to games. And there we are. Let's flip it over, turn it on and see if everything still works as it should. It may be a bit difficult to see outside. I tend to do a lot of my laptop and PC work outside just because when it's a nice day it's a lot more pleasant and the lighting conditions for filming are better. As you can see, the laptop has powered on, the facial recognition software has fired up and it should work. So in terms of everyday performance, this machine now feels so much snappier with the extra memory, especially as we have Google Chrome installed as our default browser. When it comes to gaming, well, the games that didn't even start before now do, but as I have said before, we can only do so much with the RAM upgrade because there is still a limitation with the CPU and GPU. CSGO, however, went from crushing with 2 gigs of RAM to being playable. I say playable, but you'll have to make your own minds up on that one, at 30 frames per second. Grand Theft Auto 5 also went with crushing at 2 gigabytes of RAM to around 24 frames per second on average, which isn't brilliant, but it's 1,000,000% better than it was before. However, where this thing really shines, thanks to the RAM upgrade, is in those games that ran fine on the CPU and GPU anyway, like the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, the original 2011 release. Now this ran fine with 2 gigs of RAM with about 37 FPS, but now with the upgrade we're sitting closer to 50-55 and the average comes out at just over 50, so this is actually a pretty significant performance change, and I think for this laptop that is best suited to decade-old games or beyond, well, 8 gigs of RAM will really give it a new lease of life in some instances, and when we come to sell it on, it will certainly be a more pleasant overall user experience for its new owner. So with all that said, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, leave a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.